changing the wording so people don't realize what it means. These bureaucrats, particularly in the European Union, because they have the most devious ones there, although they're in European national parliaments as well, of course, they are experts at wording legislation so that people don't see what it really means. And then when you try to do something, oh, no, you can't do that, or you have to do this, you say, well, when did that? Oh, yeah, here it is. Clause 7, subclause 5, and all the rest of it. That's where it, and the thing that makes politics and so-called democracy so ludicrous, not just in the European Union, but my goodness me, it's this a massive example, but in national parliaments as well, is that the politicians who vote for it never read it. They read a fraction of what goes through. The Patriot Act in America went through. People weren't given a chance to read that. The stuff that went through with regard to the banking bailout towards the end of the last year in the Bush administration, etc., they never read that. There's so much legislation being put before politicians just to rub a stamp, and it's so detailed, and there's so many elements to it. There's no way, A, they're going to read it, and B, they're going to understand most of it anyway. Yeah. And so they're voting through into so-called democratic law what is nothing more than laws that have been decided and written by bureaucrats that no one ever knows about. Yeah. And of course, what you've seen to make this even more potent in the last few years and even decades, it's got faster and faster, is the speed and the expansion of the amount of legislation that is going through parliaments and the European Union. There's just so much of it, they can't keep up with it. And within all that legislation are all the key clauses and all the key laws that are building this fascist dictatorship. I think it was during the 10 years of Tony Blair in the British Parliament, I think the figure was that a new law was passed on average every 3 hours. Oh, God. I mean, just think about that.
Yeah. Sheesh. Yeah, it's insane, as you say, and who can keep up with it really? And it's a fascist bureaucracy. That's what we're faced with here in one way. And I also on top of this, of course, we have the potential political ideology of the EU that we can discuss as well. I don't know if you know that Barroso actually was at one point he was, I think, kind of a prominent member for the student Maoist movement in Portugal around like 79 or whatever, when they had their communist period over there. And he is, of course, today the president of the European Commission. And he and Sarkozy, of course, are the poster boys for this, but they basically laugh in Neil Farage's face when he actually exposes the people that he have chosen to represent European Union on the higher levels, and just he detailed the fraud that these people have been involved with, And to me, at least at this point, it seems like the overarching ideology of the European Union now is actually going to be more like a socialist dictatorship, just as you mentioned that this guy, I think his name is Vladimir Bukovsky, who warned that the EU is turning into another Soviet kind of dictatorship here.
Yeah, that's the guy. And what has happened with the European Union is that the interbreeding families in the background have orchestrated all of this. If you go back to the earlier part of the 20th century, you pick up organizations like the Pan-Europa movement, which was very close to the Rothschild family and the Habsburg dynasty.
Yes, that's right.
In fact, Otto von Habsburg is still its official head all these years later. They were orchestrating this whole thing. And of course, after the Second World War, when all those millions of people were killed and maimed to stop the Nazis taking control of the whole of Europe, if what we have now had been proposed, then there would have been an outcry. So what they did was do the totalitarian tiptoe. But this, where we are now, was always going to be where it was heading. And there has been certain key people. In Britain, there was a man called Ted Heath,
Yes.
who is massively exposed in my books. I mean, this man was a Satanist, a serial child killer on an amazing level. I mean, this man was unbelievable. He's dead now. But I said all this in my books before he died, and a journalist rang him after a book called The Biggest Secret came out, just a few days, and read the passages to him where I was talking about him. Now, this was a powerful man who could have had me in court in a minute if he wanted to. Mm-hmm. But all he said was, David Icke must be mad. And that was it. And then never heard another word, because I know from so many sources that what I was saying about him was true.
And he didn't want to bring it up, I guess.
Exactly. And he was the front man to bring the European dictatorship to Britain. In fact, he was prime minister between 1970 and 74, and he was the one who signed us into the common market, which became the European Union. So and he was a Bilderberger. He was close to the Rothschilds, usual thing. These families put in the different, I mean, Sarkozy is a wonderful example in France now, and Mandelson in Britain. They put their key agents in the different countries, and their job, as I was saying earlier, their job is to introduce the agenda in their sphere of influence, and that is, over the decades since the 40s and 50s, get your country in the European Union, agree to more and more centralization of power and less power for national parliaments, and it moves on to where we are now. But it's being orchestrated in the background by these families, and they want exactly the same all over the world, to have the second tier of government under the world government, which they're now working to introduce.
And for people who are interested in more of the pan-European movement and who got started on that, could check up on a guy called Richard Nicholas von Coudenhorst-Kalergi as well. I'm going to have a link up on this so people can
that's the guy.
research.
He worked with the Habsburgs.
That's right, exactly. Another bloodline actually had some samurai nobility from Japan in his past, and he was what they call kind of the first European. You know, they have this idea about the pan-Europeanism, that they're trying to create a kind of a European identity as well. As they're eroding the national identity, they kind of need something to replace that, and you can kind of see that emerging right now as well.
What they're doing, Henrik, and when I'm talking about Ted Heath, funnily enough, we have a thing in this country called the 30-year rule, and when cabinet documents and stuff, well, the ones they don't stop coming out even then are made public and stuff. And it came out eventually what Ted Heath was doing, and this applies to every country. This happens in every country. What Ted Heath was agreeing to things on behalf of Britain that he wasn't telling Britain he was agreeing to. And what clearly has been orchestrated through these years in every country, and these Ted Heath documents absolutely confirmed it, is right from the start, the idea, coming to what you've just been talking about, has been to turn the European Union into the equivalent of a country.
Yes.
And with each area of the European Union being designated to specialize in certain things. So when you read these documents and you see that Ted Heath was agreeing that, believe it or not, an island nation, the United Kingdom, was not going to specialize in fishing. What? It was not going to specialize in things like coal mining and production. It was going to be like a services and financial center, right? And that other parts of Europe were going to specialize in this, and other parts were going to specialize in that. And then you look at what's happened since, as the decades have unfolded, the laws of the European Union have absolutely devastated the British fishing industry. Yeah. We have no coal mining industry in Britain anymore. Our industrial base has been run down systematically. And for people that may be new to this, you know, these guys are not making this up as they go along. What is happening in the world now has been planned for not just decades, but hundreds of years, because people say that's not possible. Yes, it is. If you go beyond just human beings, it certainly is possible. And it's playing out as it's been long orchestrated. And